Hello, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai, coming at you live with a video. As you can see, yes, I found my karate gi, which also doubles as a sword gi, but that's not the point. Today is going to be the throwback review of the Dragon King Winter Sun. As you can obviously see, I've made some modifications, upgrades, etc., etc. I won't bore you with the whole, list of reading into everything like I did before. This is a throwback review, which I'm going to actually make very short. This is kind of like more of an update, but I call them throwbacks. In any case, in Shintoism, natural world, infused kami spirits, etc., etc., etc. Overall, I will recap, however, the measurements, as I do not have a means of verifying them at the moment because I'm still trying to find my scale. Let's see here, 44.5 inch overall length, 31.5 inch blade, 3 pounds, edge sharp, with 31.1 millimeters, thickness 7.6 to 3.6, pommel non-existent because katana. Point of balance is 5 and 7/8 inches from Cult of Athena measures from the Suba. Personally, I think we should measure from the Habaki, because that's actually where the blade truly begins. The rest of it is just tang going from there down. Blade material is 5160 high carbon steel, which is a spring steel. If you don't know what 5160 is, it's the same steel that's used in pretty much every truck leaf spring on the market. Type, katana, class, battle ready, culture, Japan, manufacturer, Dragon King, country of origin, China. So, with the specifications out of the way, what have I done? How's the sword handled since I have gotten it? And honestly, I haven't really handled this a whole lot since I got the Warrior O. Simply put, the Warrior O is more fitting for my stature and my preferences in terms of sword and sword size. This would be more for this would be more if I was going to do more of a traditional practice. Whereas with the Warrior O, I basically just use my own sword style that I created, which is the Howling Wolf, Wind and Thunder style. But in any case, how is the sword held up? Well, if we take a look here, you obviously know I had to figure out some way to put my tassel on here, turning this into kind of a tachi, if you would. The koigata, the kashira has finally started to become loose. It's not really loose in the sense that it will come up really easily, but it is looser. If I really have to, since I don't really want to remove this wrap because it is very comfortable, I can always just hold it upside down for about 2 hours with some super glue so that it just fills in the voids and locks it in. The patina has also come off, which is why it looks more brown than black. Honestly, it looks more like a dark caramel color. Now, I have the ring light on, so I have a lot of good light. The knots are also very well done. Like I said before, I'm going to be more in depth with these. So the knots have not moved. I haven't felt any discomfort using the knots. When I do grip the bottom of this sword, I do actually feel these very little tiny nodes on the bottom of the shiridome. Not really a hot spot at all. It's just worth noting that they are there and they are a tactile feeling I have when indexing. And I actually prefer to rest my pinky on them. Fun fact. The Samaigawa has not discolored at all. It is still bright white. The Minuki are snowflakes, hence the whole winter theme. The Ito has not loosened in the slightest since I've gotten it. Well, maybe over the Minuki right, the top Minuki right here, just ever so, but not noticeable, not anything to cause for alarm. The Ito is still to my standards, which I don't have as high a standards as Matthew Jensen does. Basically, if I can not move the Ito around without having to exert it, I feel that that is an acceptable level of tightness. Now, on a sword that at the time retailed for $370 something when I bought, I think it was $360 something when I bought it new. It's now $379.99 on Gold of Athena. I completely find this acceptable for that $400 Ito tight range. The Suka itself is well shaped. Like I mentioned when I first got it, it is on the thinner side that I would like. I would have liked it if the thickness itself on this plane is perfect. I would have liked it just a little bit wider. Honestly, I would have liked it to be shaped a little more like my Hanwei Raptors. In terms of width, those Sukas have just the perfect amount of width for my liking. But this is also very good. It's very nice in the hand and it feels comfortable as well. Now, moving on to the Suba. I have taken this sword apart a couple of times because the Suba throws off my perception and I keep thinking that this thing is bent, and I took it apart to ensure that it wasn't bent. But as you can hear, very noticeable, audible shaking of the Suba. Now, funny enough, only the Suba is loose on this. Well, I spoke too soon. The Fushira is also loose, but that's because it no longer has that insane amount of pressure fit that it came with. It's kind of broken in by now. Now the Habaki, still perfectly centered, doesn't move, doesn't shake at all. It's just the Suba. And I'm thinking I might have to do what Bird did and take some, cut out a piece of like thick rubber or plastic and kind of mish that in there a little bit to kind of dull that rattling, because there's not enough room to actually fit another seppa in there. And while it does give you that satisfying like click sound of swords in anime and such, that's not exactly a good thing, because if it's loose here, then that means that while generally speaking it won't affect the functionality of the blade itself, it could affect the structural integrity over time. And what do I mean by this? Well, when swords are first made and they're nice and tight and conformed, when shock goes into the blade and travels down into the tang, on European swords, the cross guard, the grip, and the pommel all act as semi-shock absorbers, taking a lot of that stress out of the blade. With Japanese blades, that job is generally done by the Habaki, but the same principle applies. The Habaki, the Seppa, the Suba, the other Seppa, and the Fushira, then the wooden core, the Suga, the Samegawa, the Rayskin, Samegawa, the Ito wrap, all work in tandem to alleviate a lot of undue stress on the blade. So, while people say that a little rattle isn't necessarily a big deal, it's not, but at the same time, it can affect the structural integrity of the sword over prolonged periods of time. That's why we YouTube swordsmen basically try to mitigate that by retightening our fittings. I could make a whole new set of koshirae for this. Well, I'd have to reuse the existing koshirae, but I could make a new suka core for this, but I'm not going to because I actually very much like how this sword handles with its original fittings. A NyQuil glove spacer will fix the problem on its own. Now, with that in mind, we will now move up to the slashy kill part of the sword. Matthew Jensen has pointy stabby part. I have slashy cut you apart part. Or slashy kill part. The blade again is 5160 high carbon spring steel. If you look, it has a mirror polish on the mune or the spine. It does not have a geometric yukote, which is this little line right here that separates the kisaki from the rest of the hi, I believe it's called in Japanese, the edge. This blade is sharp all the way up to the kisaki tip. And honestly speaking, I can't really fault the blade for anything. It's sharp, it holds its edge well, and it is a good cutter. However, if we move back down to the Tsuba, you'll see that it features two Japanese snow monkeys in a blizzard. Now, there's something on the original pictures of this sword on Cult of Athena that it had that, honestly, I was a little disappointed that it didn't have when I got it. And that was actually supposed to be a etching, a frosted etching of a snowflake on the other side of the sword. And I was a little disappointed. Oh, I was notably disappointed when I didn't see that. I figured it was either a factory error, or this may have been, or the Tsuba may have been remodeled. But in any case, the blade itself is extremely nice. It cuts well, and as you can see, at no point do I have to struggle to control it. Honestly, I have to disagree with Matthew Jensen when he made the review of this, saying it was a heavy sword. It's not, at least mine isn't a heavy blade. Mine may be a later model that they kind of refined a little more. But I don't find this to be a heavy sword. It is definitely on the longer end of production swords, which is perfect if you are a larger guy like myself with long arms. It is quite well suited to a practitioner who has a long arm and a long draw, as I can demonstrate because I'm actually wearing a belt with this. If you hadn't noticed, that's why it's not coming unfolded. So, foot into sword belt. And again, now I am not actually accustomed to doing what you just witnessed, which is called sayabiki, where you pull both the saya and the blade out at the same time. What I am accustomed to doing is basically this, where the saya stays stationary and I'm drawing the blade out, which is often referred to as bato jutsu. Sayabiki is more found in EI, which it's a controversial subject. If you ask a lot of practitioners of the Japanese sword in EI that do a lot of cutting with their swords, and the such and so's, they'll tell you that EI is pretty much just a dance. No real swordsman would sit down and begin a fight from a sitting position. And then the EI people are like, oh, it's such a refined and dignified art, and it just gets into a whole, like, my dick's bigger than yours measuring contest. But overall, as you can witness, this sword is very good. It also comes with a black Ishime lacquer, and to my current knowledge, I'm not entirely sure if it actually does come with real horn, buffalo horn fittings here, here, and here, but I have no reason to doubt that they are not real buffalo. Simply because I can't tell. I really don't know how to tell. If any of you know how to tell, then just let me know in the comments. However, the Koiguchi, in my personal opinion, is actually done quite well. They didn't remove a ton of wood from this. As far as I can tell, I would have actually liked to see this wood a bit thicker as a reinforcement of the actual wood of the saya itself. But that would also mean that they would have to make the saya itself thicker, which I get it. Most practitioners like these very thin, very sleek saya, but I personally don't. And here's the reason why. I feel personally that the saya should be able to be used as a backup weapon in case you need it. Because you never know, you could be fighting a duel in the street for whatever reason. Someone offended your honor or whatever. And all of a sudden, like, you lose your blade. Like, what are you going to do? You pull your saya. Granted, that the saya is not as dangerous as the blade, but you can use your saya to block your opponent's blade, or just kind of keep your opponent at bay until you reclaim your sword. Hell, you can even use them in tandem. Alright? Use your saya as a, basically like the Wakazaki in Nitenichi Ryu, you use your saya to block your opponent, and you use your blade to cut, or vice versa, if you want to do a non-lethal attack. Remember, saya are replaceable. Much easier than a blade. Okay? In terms of the Japanese sword, the blade itself can take anywhere from a week to a month to forge, depending on technique, craftsman, whether they're using a power hammer or not, or whether they're using just straight out hand tools. A true, authentic Japanese style blade in the way they did it in the Sengoku era takes a lot longer to forge. Well, I say Sengoku era because that, in my opinion, is pretty much the heyday and last days of the true samurai. True warriors who fought to the death for what they believed in. After the Edo period, once the Edo period got in, samurai basically become lazy bums that freeload off of the fact that they are samurai. When I picture a samurai, I picture Sengoku era, Kamakura era, hell, Muromachi era. Those are the warriors I picture as samurai. Warriors who fought in true battle. Because once you enter an era of peace, here's the thing about peace, about war and peace. In times of war, you want soldiers, but in times of peace, you don't want them. And that's fine and all. But if your periods of war outstretch your periods of peace, and you have far more warriors left over from those warring times that go into the peaceful era, then honestly speaking, depending on the person, they could be either grateful that they get to live a peaceful life or miserable because they loved battle. And believe it or not, there are people even today in militaries across the world and even in our own military that actually genuinely love to fight. Very few, but that's not just an anime trope. That trope came from somewhere. There are people that have the warrior mentality of wanting to fight. I personally am one of them, but I also have a kill anything that moves policy when I'm on a battlefield. So, give and take. But in any case, I went on a whole tangent, forgot what the hell I was talking about. Sword. So, just a moment. Okay, so after having some inner monologue with myself and trying to figure out exactly what the hell I've been trying to say for the last 5 minutes, I have come to the conclusion that it is time to actually give the conclusion. So, the Dragon King Winter Sun. What do I think of it? First of all, I think it is a brilliant sword if you're either looking for a good quality, strong, durable blade to do either bottle cutting, bamboo cutting, or tatami cutting for that matter. Because I do believe while it won't be a quote-unquote tatami laser cutter, which generally thin, wide blades are, this is not a thin, wide blade, but it is a thin, narrow blade. I think it would be very perfect for either a backyard cutter who has a little more scarcely limited cutting targets like branches, saplings, stuff like that. I've cut through the thick vines. Like if you've ever been in the forest up near Indiana, Kentucky, Appalachia in general, you know, the thick vines that grow from trees. I've cut straight through multiple ones of those with this sword, and it's sailed through them just fine. I do believe that this is a high quality, medium budget blade that would be good for either experienced or even inexperienced hands. Especially because of the fact that it's 5160 spring steel, it can take a beating and keep on licking. It won't take a set or bend easily. And if you're getting this for someone to first start their whole journey into practicing swordsmanship, 5160 is not bad at all for a beginner's blade. If you go to a lot of martial art dojos, generally speaking, the blade that they have for beginners to cut is what is generally considered a beater blade, which is a blade that is purposely built to take abuse, bad cuts, poor edge alignment, and keep on ticking. Not to say this is generally a beater blade. I would say that, honestly, while this could be used as a beginner's blade, I honestly feel like it would be much better suited in the hands of a intermediate to experienced cutter. That's where this sword could really shine. I feel like it could be used from anywhere from beginner to intermediate to experienced cutter. So it can cover a wide user base. Not to mention the fact that if you do intend to teach anybody how to cut, and you have this sword around, because of that simple fact, as long as they don't hit anything like a nail or metal on metal, then even if they botch the edge alignment a little bit, being that it is spring steel, the chances of them seriously doing anything to the blade is null and void. Do I believe that this should be a beginner cutter's first sword? No. And here's why. Its overall length. Okay? The longer a sword blade is, actually makes it harder to control. John from RVA Katana said it best. If you're going to be cutting with a Nodachi, get a spring steel Nodachi because of the length of the blade. Longer blades are harder to cut with because they're harder to control and harder to get good edge alignment. So that's why, while it can be used for a beginner, I wouldn't recommend it straight out as a beginner's blade. This would be more an intermediate to experienced cutter's sword, simply because of its length. Now, aside from that, it also has a lot of other characteristics that cater to beginner, intermediate, experienced swordsmen. Aside from its length, the Suka core tapers downwards, and that also increases the grip and control of the blade. Because of the tapering downwards, it means that you can get your hand around the bottom and the top, and it fills your hand very well, and that gives you a lot of control. The saya being a black Ishime lacquer, which means it has all these little speckly dots, means that it's a very tough and forgiving saya that is meant to take bings and dings and dents. And generally speaking, you can touch these kinds of saya up with a black Sharpie, and from distance, no one's going to really be able to tell that you dinged your saya and just took a Sharpie and filled in the wood crack. Also, I should mention that the shirodome on the koigata are actually glued in, which is nice. And no, this is not the wrap this comes with. This is my own wrapping I did. Because winter theme, I thought a white Sageo would look a lot better. And it does, in my opinion, since this is a winter white and black sword. And yes, I did do some decorations with Sharpie, making it look like falling snow. This is the only blade that I've literally put glitz and glamour on, basically, aside from the Warrior O. Because these are actually the Warrior O and this one are actually my two favorite swords. And if I had to pick, I would actually use these in a Daisho formation, but the Warrior O is pretty much impossible to wield one-handed for long durations, even for me. And we've seen me swing around big-ass weapons before. Poleaxe, for example, in one of the live streams. But yeah. Not to mention, if you're planning to do EI, and you're a larger individual that needs the extra length blade, it's very good at quick drawing. Overall, final thoughts on this sword is that it's a very good blade, extremely well built. Dragon King does very high quality work for a respectable price. And I can honestly wholeheartedly recommend this sword for anyone in the beginner, intermediate, and experienced class levels. Now, not to say that someone of higher class levels couldn't use this sword. That would be from experience to master. That would be from experienced up to what I would consider master level. or beginner, intermediate, experienced, master, and competition level. Now you're probably wondering, well, master and competition, does that go together? And no. Quick, short and dirty, a master is a master of sword fighting, while competition is a master of cutting. And the difference between fighting and cutting is a video for a whole other thing. Alright, you want to know the difference as I see it? Write in the comments below. I'll make the video and we'll have a good old discussion. I may do it as a live stream. But yes, final thoughts and conclusions. This is a perfect beginner. This is not a perfect beginner sword. It is a perfect sword to give to someone who already either has existing skill with a blade, or you are going to teach and is of taller stature. I will be making videos on the swords that I have available of what degrees I believe each sword would fall into, as to whether they would be beginners, level, etc., etc., etc. So until next time, I know we'll band of outlaws, outlaw samurai tells all y'all be crazy rednecks, we safely use their weapons, and while this is probably over 30 minutes long, in all fairness, it's also shorter than the other throwback review of the Italian longsword. So, I'm out. Peace.